Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I'm Menners. I'm joined by my co-host Gav Joshi. Gav, as we record this, Australia have slumped to 0-2 in the World Cup, coming off an absolute spanking by South Africa. I said weeks ago that the Australian team had to be wary, that they had a tough start, and it's come true, hasn't it?
Absolutely. The other thing you were very conscious of, and you made a big statement about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, was you said that the Australian fielding hasn't been up to the mark. And yes, we're going to have to talk about that as well because 5 or 6 drop catches, a few fumbles here and there. But look, we're surrounded by black. If you're in your background is black. I'm wearing a black shirt. You're wearing a black shirt. It's not quite there for Australian cricket yet, but we've addressed it on this podcast. It's a tough start, and they've still got Sri Lanka to come. But
then Pakistan, we could be 0-4. So we're going to wrap up the game, but I think a lot of listeners and viewers will be expecting me to go full Mad Manners, and I'm on the verge of just teeing off because this is one big disaster so far. But there are 7 games left, and I'd love to think that we can turn it around. I'm critical of a lot of things, but there's a lot of talent in the squad. I really hope they can turn it around. I don't think it's going to happen, but I am on the verge of losing my mind. Just to give you an example of what triggered me, this morning, Tim Payne was doing his radio show, Gav, and he was asked by his co-host if he thought Justin Langer was sacked too early. And Tim Payne's response was, "I don't have an opinion." Gav, that to me is a yes. He's too afraid to say it. That to me just indicates that Australian cricket have gone wrong a couple of years ago.
Look, you can argue with that. At the end of the day, you want a happy change room, and clearly under JL, there wasn't a happy change room. It's moved on. That chapter's moved on. What we need to talk about is the game matters. I understand you're fuming, and let it settle. Let it settle. It's only 2 matches.
I have to let it settle. All right, let's get into it.
Your biggest childhood hero is Steve Waugh, and he turned around in the '99 World Cup. So let's not just sort of say this all hope is lost, but certainly have to turn it around quick.
Yeah, it looks very bleak, but you're right. But yeah, I'm that close to losing it, but I haven't snapped yet. All right, so let's get into the match. So firstly, big changes at the toss. Australia announced that they had dropped Alex Carey and put in Josh Inglis. They also dropped Cameron Green and brought in Marcus Stoinis. Now let's go through them individually, Gav. I don't mind Inglis coming into the side, but it does reek of hitting the panic button. You should be pretty confident in your first choice wicketkeeper at the start of a World Cup, and clearly they weren't.
Yeah, it staggered me. I thought you said panic button. I mean, Inglis, we've seen him play, but a couple of his outings, I think he's been opening the batting as well in some of the warm-up matches as well. So that I thought it was a bit strange. Also, the fact that I actually like Australia having a left-hander in the middle. I mean, tactically, and if you're looking for this Australian team, they're looking for a lot of matchups as well. That Pat Cummins is from what I've heard, is that sort of character who goes and does a lot of research, looks for these matchups. So it was absolutely staggering for Alex Carey. And what does that say to the team when Alex Carey, who, is pretty much, I think he was been a vice captain of Australia. So having him drop, we saw what happened in that first test in India when Travis Head got dropped, and we know there was a bit of not all the players were happy that Travis got dropped because he's a senior player. Again, Alex Carey is one of the leaders in this team, if we're to go by that, from what we've been told. So, look, I was absolutely staggered to see Alex. If it happened another 2 games, but fine. But unless there was an injury or something which we haven't heard of, I was absolutely staggered. Although Bharat Sundaresan, our good friend, the journalist over there, he did put out a smart tweet after training. He said the way Alex Carey sort of batted and just stopped and sort of sat on an esky and looked out for, like a dejected figure almost in a way, that almost the writing was on the wall for him.
Yes, and what frustrates me about that decision is it indicates poor planning and having no real certainty about what your best team going into the World Cup is. And you're right, that is going to put tremors through the whole team now because no one will feel secure. And yeah, so first bit of the red lights went off there. I don't mind Green being dropped for Stoinis. I think
Yep.
Stoinis potentially has more upside.
Which begs the question, and I didn't have Cameron Green in my World Cup squad. I mean, if he's not your 6, he's not your 7, he's not your maybe even not your 5. He can't bat in the top 3 because perhaps we've seen this in the last couple of days, even coming out with this new management that they're going to rest players and recovery is so important. He's not going to be able to bat at 3 and play the whole game. They won't risk him. So which begs the question, what is Cameron Green, according to me, doing in that squad? Anyway, going back to wicketkeeper, I'm going to sneak another one in. Bring back Matty Wade.
You said it first. You're the only person in Australia, I think, who said that. And, I'm a big Matty Wade fan. So Australia won the toss and they elected to field. So a good decision by Pat Cummins, I think. And then it was the problem started for Australia. South Africa put on 108 for the first wicket. Australia dropped Temba Bavuma 3 times. Zampa dropped a difficult one at deep third, didn't get near it. And I do want to point this out, and I'm not having a go at Zampa, but he doesn't offer a lot in the field. And this has been a consistent thing for him. He's not a terrible fielder, but he's not a great fielder either. And so he's not bowling well, he's not fielding well, and he's not there for his batting, but he's not having a great start. So then Inglis dropped Bavuma off Zampa, which was a very tough chance, a huge deviation. And you can't expect a keeper to take it.
As one could argue that Australians were trying to keep Bavuma out there.
That's what I thought, because the big hitters would have come. And then Abbott dropped Bavuma in the outfield that you'd expect him to catch. That was when Bavuma was on 31. Eventually, he was dismissed for 35. South Africa were 1 for 108. The drop chances continued. Cummins dropped all Corton bowls are difficult, but the one he dropped off Aidan Markram when he was on 1, you'd expect most bowlers to take that, wouldn't you, Gav?
Yeah, it's probably when teams are doing well, they're running on confidence, they take those catches. When when there's a little bit going on in your mind, or you're not high with confidence, these things just happen, Menners. It's just not in cricket. But I say, like you go on a holiday somewhere and you're like, oh, I wonder what the weather's going to be. But when things are going good in your life, the sun's always shining. It's one of those kind of moments.
Exactly. Stark dropped Miller off Cummins not long after. And then in the 49th over, Stoinis dropped Jansen. So that's 6 drop catches. There was also a couple of misfields. Very concerning, Gav. Australia has always prided itself on being excellent fielders. And I know it is inarguable they have been doing less fielding training since Andrew McDonald took over. There are numerous quotes. I'm not saying they're bludgers or they're not working hard at all, but they are training a lot less, and we are seeing the results in the field. You cannot argue against it.
Is that what triggered you to sort of almost make that point maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago? I think it was before even the South Africa series, when you said, I think it was in August, where you said, no, I have concerns for Australia's fielding. What made you say that?
Because a lot of players have said that training now is a lot more optional than it ever has been.
That's
McDonald lets the players run the show now. And players don't like fielding training because it's bloody hard work. Gone are the days when you had Bob Simpson running fielders from side to side on the outfield practicing high catches. I would be curious when the last time was they did a proper full-on intense fielding session. And they're obsessed now with workload management, keeping fresh. That's what happens when you put a fast bowler skipper. And my other thing is, I don't think there's enough responsibility being put on the captain. I think Cummins is leading sort of by committee. And when you lead by committee, no one takes the final responsibility. George Bailey should have said to Steve Smith, your captain, your reputation is going to live or die by this cup. Here's your chance. Go and prove something. Be the leader we need. Or Mitch Marsh, even anybody.
Well, while I was watching the game, I was just having a bit of a WhatsApp conversation with a couple of former Indian cricketers, and they were astounded. They're saying, why isn't Steve Smith captaining this team? One of them was commentating at the indoor test match where Steve Smith's captaincy basically won Australia, played an integral part in Australia winning that test match. With the fields he set, the tempo they allowed the game to run. When he brought his team back, I think he felt that Steve Smith understands subcontinent play better than any other player. And because he's a good player of spin bowling, he understands angles, and that's where he thought, well, that's one of the reasons. Forget what's happening in the dressing room, yes, but tactically as well, I think Smithy loves it. I think Smithy loves captaining the team and thinking that about the game.
Absolutely. So I think that's a problem when you have this kind of captaincy by committee, then no one's really in the gun, and you get these sort of substandard results. I also think it actually disrespects the sanctity of the Australian captaincy position and the sanctity of a World Cup. We have never gone into a major tournament with a captain with this little experience in any format. He's not even captained 10 50 over games. I think it's total, domestic and international. So you're telling me that's not taking things for granted, and then you get things start to go a bit pear-shaped, and we really struggle. So let's go through the bowling for Australia against South Africa. Stark, 9 overs, 2 for 53. First thing, Gav, why is Stark only bowling 9 overs?
And actually,
did Cummins get his maths wrong? Because you're asking him to bowl as well, George Bailey and Andrew McDonald.
Is that inexperience? Because I remember when Aaron Finch took over in the T20 captaincy. I remember there was a T20 against India at the Gabba, and he got it wrong. And he later admitted I think it was at the presser where he said, "Oh, actually, I did my numbers wrong." So, but after that, Finch's but my thing with the Australian bowling is, were they trying to get the South Africans batters out, or were they waiting for the South African batters to make a mistake? I think it was the latter. I mean, Mitch Stark was swinging the ball. I would have given him another over. Yes, Glenn Maxwell bowled really well.
Zampa bowled an over in the last 10. He went 10 overs, 1 for 70. Why wasn't that over given to Stark?
I don't know. I'm still, I know Maxwell bowled well, and he matches up well against Quinton de Kock, but for Zampa, who's lost confidence, and to me, I don't think Zampa's bowled badly as such. He's not, but the thing is, there's just a lot of confidence there. I just with Zampa, and I think that's somebody's job to just go, maybe, hey mate, you are our primary spinner. Power plays over, you get the 11th over and have a go and have an attack. And I just think we might see that against Sri Lanka in the next game, but I think it just needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So Hazelwood, continuing through the figures, 9 overs, 1 for 60. So he didn't complete his 10. Maxwell bowled well, 10 overs, 2 for 34. Cummins, 9 overs, 1 for 71. Conceded almost 8 and over. Yet again, our least performing fast bowler, yet he's the captain. So you're asking him to lead the side through a tournament. Cummins doesn't look the same to me since the Ashes. He still looks emotionally tired. He didn't look himself in that game. He didn't look happy, and we're asking too much of him. And everyone laughs, "Oh, Menners, get off Cummins' back." We are asking too much of one of our greatest players. Zampa, 10 overs, 1 for 70. You mentioned that, and again, so you speak about Cameron Green being in the side. There's no second spinner. So if Zampa really does come off the rails, we ain't got a spinner.
Well, Glenn Maxwell's probably a number one spinner in terms of figures. Yeah, of course, Adam Zampa is. But look, I just, you also that you're winning the toss and bowling first. I mean, look, I'm not there, but from they thought, and it was interesting comments that they felt that the ball did quite a bit under lights to start off with when we come. So Australia, I think should all in a crunch situation should bat first. I mean, I reckon, and I think there's a little bit of lost faith there, and we've seen it, Menners, in those 4 one-dayers in South Africa. Whenever South Africa batted first, I think they won by 100 runs every time. So yes, you got to take ground history into consideration, but sometimes I feel like it's over-analysed. Australia's strength, especially this bowling team, is probably the bowl first, and the way the ball moved under lights, it's gone. It's in hindsight now, but I was a little bit surprised that Australia actually didn't bat first yesterday.
Well, the reports coming out of the ground are that the dew came in a little later in the second innings than it did in Australia's first game. And I do have some sympathy, though, for Cummins with this because, Australia batted first against India, had India 3 for 2, and then the dew came in and kind of didn't help them. So I sort of get why they wanted to bowl first. But what jumped out to me, South Africa finishing with 7 for 311 was actually really good on that wicket. That wasn't a
No.
350, 400 wicket. That was a 280, 300
Well,
wicket, and they
well,
went
but
over.
Bavuma, I think, said that 280, 290 was a really good, was a par score. So he actually thought they were above par.
Yeah, and Quinton de Kock, I've been talking how badly Australia's played, but Quinton de Kock made a marvellous century, 109 off 106 deliveries. Aidan Markram, a beautiful 56 off 44, but that dropped return catch off Cummins was very costly. Then Klaassen, Miller, Marco Jansen all made contributions, but none of them really got away from Australia. So halfway through, when South Africa posted 311, I was ready to go to bed. I knew there was no chance we were getting them. How were you feeling?
I still thought, because I always had the due factor, and given that South Africa probably didn't bowl that well against Sri Lanka, I didn't think Jansen went for a few. I think he went for 80 odd or 90, and so I just felt like it almost. You got to suss the conditions out. I think that's the tricky part, and Australia's realizing that in India now, that some grounds, I know the Wankhede Stadium does it. We saw it in Lucknow last night. Chennai was probably more off the deck rather than in the air. But under lights, some places, because India is such a vast country, up north, Lucknow will have like a sunset probably 45 minutes earlier than, even an hour earlier than Chennai. So the twilight is at different times. So you have to check if the ball's going to do under light, and it's hard to judge. And I think you got to not have a set game plan. I think you need to just be wary. And that's why I thought, Mitch Marsh's job was that. Warner, look, I mean, the other days he probably slashes that for 4, but Australia probably had to do it even the old way on that pitch. But the problem doing it in the old way, is the 5, 6, and 7. I think we've got no confidence in that. So
I mean, they fell behind straight away. So Australia was none for 27 in the 6th over. So you're lagging behind the run rate, which you don't want to do on that pitch. You want to sort of stay in touch. So Mitchell Marsh is the first to go, caught by Bavuma off Marco Jansen for 7. So Australia was 27 for 1. Then we slumped to 6 for 70. Warner, you're right, slapped one to cover for 13. Now, Steve Smith, LBW to Kagiso Rabada. A lot of speculation about this one. From the naked eye, it looked like it was umpire's call or missing leg, but then Hawkeye had it slamming into leg stump, and Steve Smith had to go. Where do you sit on that decision?
Watching it live, I thought they went up just because purely it was Steve Smith and the way he was batting. He hit Rabada for 2 fours in that over, or the ball before at least, and they felt, okay, let's have a go. When you zoom it down, you can just see while the angle's there, the ball does sort of hold its line, if I can call it that, a little slightly. But I was perplexed.
Yeah, it did straighten.
It did straighten, but I don't think it was hitting, like, given you can see. I mean, Steve Smith does play a long way back as well, but like I said, naked, I said, worst comes to worst, it'll be an umpire's call. I didn't think it would be 3 minutes.
Yeah, either did I. And then Josh Inglis, who was batting at 5, he got a bit of a peach from Kagiso Rabada. He was bowled for 5. I did feel sorry for him. Brought in, and that ball angled in and nipped away and took his stumps, and he gave the Virat Kohli eyes.
Yeah, I think he's still, some players are just not there at the international level. I think that ball, it was a good ball, but just shows to me Inglis is not quite ready for international cricket yet.
And I don't think we should have our wicketkeeper batting 5, whether it's Carey or Inglis. Glenn Maxwell caught and bowled Kehav Masharaj for 3, and nothing shot, just sort of spooned a loose drive.
I, as I put in my tweet, even against the Indian, resurrecting any form of innings has never been Glenn Maxwell's strength. I would even be tempted to have Stoinis ahead of him, especially in this World Cup. Stoinis actually, because if you look at the way Stoinis bats, he probably goes ... for a long time and then just goes 4-6.
So I think a lot of time at the top of the order, Stoinis.
Yeah, I would have Stoinis ahead. I still feel, you look at that 2015 World Cup. Every time Glenn Maxwell has done well for Australia, there's been no pressure for him to excel. I think it was under Justin Langer or Michael Clark, where they said, "No, you bat at 7. Doesn't matter how you play."
Well, that was Lehman. That was Lehman.
It was Lehman. I beg your
2015 World Cup.
I beg your pardon. Yep, it was Darren Lehman. He said, "There's no pressure on you. If you get out first ball, doesn't matter." And I think Glenn Maxwell thrives on that. The minute you say you've got to construct an innings, I don't. I think there's a lot of sort of Glenn Maxwell sees a lot of red.
Mm. And then the final top order player to go to make it 6 for 70 was Marcus Stoinis, caught down the leg side by Dukakov Rabada. Here's another controversial one. It appeared the glove, it
Yes.
appears the ball brushed his glove, but the hand was off the bat handle. But the third umpire said that although his hand was off the bat handle, it was slightly touching the other glove. But on certain camera angles, it didn't look like they were in contact. So I do think Stoinis was a bit unlucky. And for once, they actually made the decision very quickly. I think they maybe rushed it.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, Richard Kettlebell is the third umpire. He's one of the best in business. So I like what Marnus Labuschagne said. He's like, it for me, it was bit pixelated on watching. I'm sure the third umpire has, high definition screens around him. He probably sees something that we can't. But look, I think my eyes were, at about sort of 1:45 a.m. at that time. I was happy to umpire to give it out and me to close my eyes and then shut down the shop. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And sensibly from 6 for 70, Australia did play for net run rate because that's all that they could do. And eventually were bowled out for 177. Stark made 27, Cummins 22. Labuschagne was out for 46 of 74. He was the top scorer. For South Africa, Rabada 3 for 33. He loves bowling against us. And then the spinners Maharaj and Shamsi took 2 wickets each. So it was Australia's 4th loss in a row in the World Cup. They lost their last 2 games in 2019 and their first 2 games of this tournament. The first time that's ever happened to Australia in World Cup cricket. It was also the biggest loss ever by runs for Australia in the World Cup because they lost by 134 runs. And last thing, Gav, on this match, I said to you, Australia had to be cautious of their start of this World Cup. Why weren't Bailey and McDonald aware of this? It was a tough start for Australia. They needed to have their best team locked in. They needed to have their best players there. They couldn't be fart-assing around with Travis Head, who's still in Adelaide, or anything like that. They needed to be 100% focused on getting off to a good start. Not this bullshit where they were like, oh, well, it's a long tournament. We've got to, peak at the right time. Doesn't matter if they peak at the end of the round stage if they've lost the first 4 games. To me, it was glib, it was irrational, it was stupid, and we're being caught out. And actually, we're kind of a bit of a laughing stock at the moment.
Yeah, there's a couple of memes floating around on WhatsApp and on social media today. But look, like I said, Menace, hold off that mad Menace for now. It's 2 games in. I'm still. We still got Sri Lanka and Pakistan, and who knows, that old foe like that game, I think on 2nd of November against England, could be a bit of a knockout match. But look,
I just think Australia can't afford to lose. They can maybe lose 1 more game and sneak in, but even then, you got 3 teams already, sort of going away on 2. There's 4 teams with 2 wins now. So we're already
it's a long way, but you're right. Like you got to question the bit of lack of planning. Like if Agar wasn't fit, what was the backup option?
This would never have happened under Langer. Never, ever, ever. I'm sorry. He was, he got sacked because he cared too much. That's the way Australian cricket's got now. He cared too much about the team and they sacked him.
Oh, well, that chapter's finished, Menace. So.
No, never. It's never finished. It's never, ever finished. All right, let's take a quick break, Gav, and then we'll be back. I want to talk a bit about some other World Cup news and then wrap up the local scene. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I'm Menace. I'm with Gav. We've just wrapped up Australia's loss to South Africa. And let's just look at some of the other World Cup action since our last show. India, England, and Pakistan have all had convincing wins. I thought India's game against Afghanistan was a great performance by them, chasing down 273 with just 2 wickets down. Rohit Sharma, 131 off 84 balls. He looks in good form, and that should be warning signs for the other teams, because if Sharma has a good World Cup, India will be hard to stop.
Yeah, most hundreds or equal Tendulkar's most hundreds at a World Cup, phenomenal. And he just came out and just absolutely slaughtered the Afghanistan bowling. It seems like if you want some runs, Delhi's the place to bat at the moment because there's plenty of runs, it's small ground. And but look, I thought, but on a flat pitch, I think Bumrah's performance again exceptional. I mean, he's too good. He's proving to why he's the best. I think one day bowler, T20 bowler in the world, and he's setting India But the innings that really caught my eye was Mohammad Rizwan. I thought
Yeah.
that was a fantastic innings. Pakistan.
So that was Pakistan. So Pakistan chased down 345 against Sri Lanka. Abdullah Shafiq made 113, and as you indicate, Mohammad Rizwan 131 not out. You're right. That was a phenomenal performance by Pakistan. It just shows how far we are from them. I mean, they didn't make 345 look easy, but they were under control.
Oh, just the way, like, and I was watching that till pretty late in the night, and it just felt like when they needed a boundary, Rizwan was able to hit a boundary. I really we saw Abdullah Shafiqi, he's played a few tests now. He just looks so he's so well suited to those conditions as well. A little bit staggered, like everyone was talking about Pathirana, the clone of Malinga.
The Piranha from Sri Lanka, Pathirana. I love him.
Yes,
but I call him the Piranha because he just eats wickets.
Well, he's eating them at a very high cost at the moment. We certainly did that night. I think he went for 90 in his sort of 8 or 9 overs. He was hammered everywhere. But I thought Sri Lankan opening bowlers were quite good. I think, but just he wasn't up to it. Full credit. I thought Pakistan was not going to chase that down. They don't have a great record chasing over 300. Babar Azam out early. I think Pakistan bowling doesn't look that good on paper. I think they're really feeling the loss of Naseem Shah. Yep. So big match, big test for them against India on Saturday night.
How big is that going to be, Gav? I mean, it's an Ahmedabad, isn't it? So it could have 135,000 people. This is another BCCI special. There was no opening ceremony for the World Cup, but they do have an opening ceremony for this game. It's going to be massive. I can't wait.
They reckon, basically the ICC or the broadcasters, they're going to make all their revenue just out of that one game. So if the rest of the games nobody watches, Menners, I think everyone's still getting a bit of profit. But yeah, they're having Bollywood stars there. They're going to have some, India's most notorious singers. He's going to be performing, and this has come out of nowhere. There's tickets going on. Events going to start nice and early. So I think best time to drive around India might be on a Saturday afternoon.
Exactly. In the last game between the last podcast, England smashed Bangladesh. England made 9 for 364 and then bowled Bangladesh out for 227. So England bounced back after their first up loss to New Zealand. Dawood Malan, 140 off 107 deliveries, batted excellently for England. And Reece Topley bowled well, taking 4 for 43. So that was a bit more of the England one-day side we're used to.
Yeah, I think Reece Topley made a big difference. Up front, we've seen left-arm seamers. I mean, even Marco Jansen having a big impact. Mitchell Starc always does. So I think, that left arm, if you've got that option, you've got to use it. Not as dibbly-dobbler like Sam Curran, but Topley has really come on. Malan outstanding. Dharamshala's outfield still a bit sandy, but
terrible.
The Ponds were having to whinge about it, but look, they got away. I think the challenge, and one of the Ben Stokes is apparently back and batting as well, so I think he might play in the next game too.
It's not good enough to have an outfield like that, though, in an ICC tournament, is it, Gav? I mean, players shouldn't be concerned about diving in a sandy outfield.
Yeah, I think, and it's so hard. I was listening to Johnny Bairstow, and he said, when your instincts to go and stop the ball, it's not that great. Like you might go injure yourself. So
absolutely, because if you're used to doing that over and over in every other game you play, you just dive before you realize, and then you might do your knee.
Yeah, and I think teams are going to be aware. There's still, 2 or 3 matches at Dharamshala. I think people need to be aware of that. Maybe if the outfield's like that, the Aussies won't be fielding there.
It won't matter if they stuff it up. All right, now that left the points table. So South Africa are now on top of the World Cup table with 2 wins. New Zealand, again, with 2 wins on 2nd spot. India, 3rd spot on 2 wins. Pakistan, 4th spot on 2 wins. Then England, a 5th spot. Bangladesh, 6th spot with their 1 win. Then Sri Lanka, Netherlands, Australia are 2nd from bottom with a woeful net run rate, minus 1.846. And that is a concern. If Australia does get close to that top 4, our net run rate is so bad that could be the difference.
It could be. Look, last World Cup was like that, and I like this format. I bit against people saying should other teams should be there, but you got need to qualify. Even Sri Lanka had to qualify. 10 teams. I think it's going to be tight to see which team. So net run rate is going to be mighty. But it's going to
Important.
decide. It's going to decide your faith possibly in getting through a semi final or not.
Definitely. All right, so that is the World Cup action. Just turning our attention briefly to the local scene. The Australian women's team 1-0 up in their one-day international series versus the West Indies. They're looking very good after winning the T20 series 2-1. The second game was washed out, so the worst they can do is draw that series. But Australia looks a much classier 50-over side than the West Indies, a little bit closer together in the T20 game. But what I'm really excited about, Gav, is the WBBL starts next week in Sydney, North Sydney Oval. There's a game, and then we get a sort of a great run of high-quality women's T20 cricket. So I'm going to try and get out to a lot of the games in Sydney because, it's fantastic. And the best way to cover the tournament is to get out there and see some of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that should be good as well. But look, right now, I mean, it's going to be interesting because it's still a lot of games are in prime time. I think that's great. I think that's going to, and now we're truly in the cricket sort of festival in Australia. This is where I think having games on prime free-to-air television is just going to help even further.
Oh, absolutely. And the TV ratings for the WBBL are outstanding. So it is a terrific tournament and glad it's starting. It often seems to correspond with, men's World Cups. Last year was the T20 World
Yeah.
Cup. This is the 50-over World Cup. But we're going to do our best on the podcast to cover it. It won't be in depth, but as I said, I want to get out there to games and give you the flavors and the taste of the tournament because I just love it. And finally, Gav, so when we recorded our last show, you and I were heading into the commentary box for the Marsh One Day Cup. Well, we ended up getting an early mark because Western Australia demolished Victoria, bowling them out for 107. So we got to see some great bowling by Jai Richardson, Jason Berendorf, Lance Morris, some terrific stuff there. But the real highlight was the other game. So New South Wales, who were coming off a shocking year last year and desperate for any win they can get, were bowled out for 217 against Queensland at North Sydney Oval. But then they reduced Queensland to 9 down for 154 and seemingly tied up the win. But Gurinder Sandhu and Kane Richardson put on the highest ever Marsh One Day Cup last wicket partnership of 73 to win the game. It was quite extraordinary.
Quite handy players lower down the order. We were on air talking about it during the Shield match, which ended up being a draw as well. How important lower order batting is these days. And, well, I'm going to bring it back to the World Cup, Minners. I mean, your 5, 6, and 7 aren't even performing. Good luck down the bottom.
So Queensland with a miracle win in the Marsh One Day Cup. Highlights are online if you want to see it. All right, Gav, well, let's just wrap it up with Can't Let It Go. Now, last episode, you put up the old stop sign for Can't Let It Go. You said you had something in the pocket that you wanted to save. What have you got for us?
Well, let me just save that because I saw something else. I was staggered. You talked about the Australian women's cricketers. I mean, they were putting covers on, Minners. When it rained, come on, surely.
Where was this? Allan Border Field?
I believe so, yes. I can't believe it. I mean, good on the girls. Full credit to the girls. Hats off, But come on, they're ground staff. Surely there's more than 2 out there. And it's the Australian national women's team. Maybe some of the journalists. If they offered you and I, wouldn't we go and do it?
Well, I might, but I'm a bit of a sucker for anything cricket related. But you make a great point. I mean, what if one of the players gets injured? It's not their job. So you're right. Good point. That was, I think, the second game that was rained out. You saw the women's players bringing them on. Incredible stuff. My can't let it go is we've lost a podcast opponent, so we should be celebrating. Although maybe not. But Gideon Hay has left the Australian as a columnist, so that means one of our competitors, cricket, etc. I don't know if there's a future for it. I mean, I love Pete Lalor and Gideon Hay, but bang, there goes a opposing podcasts. So the download should go up. Gideon and Pete have been great to me, and Pete, I taught Pete how to cricket podcast when I was at News Limited. So not that I deserve credit, but I'm going to take it. But yeah, one down. There's a few other podcasts I've got in the gun. There's another podcast where Brad Haddon is on it. And if you listen to it, you'll know the one I'm talking about. But if you just play a drinking game where you have a sip of a drink every time Haddon drops in a cricket cliche like need more intensity, I guarantee your liver will explode within a couple of episodes.
We look forward to having Brad Haddon on this podcast.
Yeah, I love Haddon. He can bring his cliches here whenever he likes. But Gav, quite seriously, Pete and Gideon are great. I did listen to it, so I'm sorry the podcast has ended. But, more listeners for us, I guess.
I hope so, Menas. You're doing a remarkable job, man. Australia lose another game. Mad Menas. Well, geez, here we go.
Yeah, you've actually really helped keep me calm today. I think had this been a solo episode, it would have been, Ashes circa 2023. Anyway. All right, listeners. Well, look, Gav's off to Japan next week, so we'll catch up with you the week after next when you're back. Hopefully by then Australia have got a couple of wins and the tournament's not over for the local fans. And listeners, I'll be back next week. I've got James Baisley returning. I've got a couple of guests to help me wrap up Australia's games against Sri Lanka and Pakistan. So, Gav, take care, enjoy Japan, and we'll catch up soon.
We'll do, Menas.